Yeah, welcome on this cold, but not horribly cold, but hopeful Friday, flagship Friday. As you know, we have these sessions every week, and we have the incredible privilege of meeting some really incredible, wonderful people. People who have influenced the industry and kind of set the tone for those of us that come after. Brenner Stickney, one of our freshman innovation fellows engineer, calls it slingshot innovation because the people like Jim and Jim, who are here, kind of let the others of us slingshot off of their excellence, their accomplishments, and that's how we learn. And I really like that definition of innovation. So today's innovation, did you know fact, is I just want to prepare you for two things. We have the Innovation Fund Challenge coming up. And that it will, the deadline for that is March 5th. We have workshops every week. That challenge distributes $10,000 among student innovation teams who will go forward with a proof of concept. It's for early phase innovation. If you need help with your application, again, we have workshops every week. Sign up on the website. I'm happy to help you. And really, it's concept development. So you have a good idea. You know, how often do you get paid for a good idea to see if it'll work? So I want to encourage you really to take risks. Nikaya is putting information in the chat so that you know where to go. The other innovation did you know fact is I want to remind you we have today the innovator's ethic, how young people are driving societal change. And we have Kevin Kimley, who's working on a manuscript, a book-length manuscript on the entrepreneurship's ethic. And Anthony Sardella, who was a toxicologist that worked with Bayer and Monsanto, and now has an AI data analytics customer insight company out of San Francisco. So he runs into ethics all the time. How do we make choices about what we do with data? And he is a fabulous, fabulous speaker. So that's at 2 o'clock today. Please feel free, if you want to attend, please feel free to sign up on our website and I will open up that link. So Jim, while I open up that link, would you mind introducing Jim Waters? Oh, would you also introduce our panel today?
Sure. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to introduce our moderator panel. First, I have Abram Anders, who's an associate professor in English. Nikaya Rucker is there. I wave Nikaya so they see you. That's good. And she's with the library, but key in our innovation programming. You all know Karen Kearns, who's director of innovation programming and the university's entrepreneur in residence. And Spencer, who's blanked out, is a key guru behind the scenes running all of this AV tech. So I noticed he answered a question already. All of you participants, you can see us and hear us, but you cannot speak. So we would like you to put your questions in the chat box and we'll address those as we go along. So any other questions before we start? Great. Well, I'm thrilled to have Jim Waters here. Jim is a good friend and colleague who's been loyal to Iowa State since he graduated in 1981, actually probably before that, in electrical engineering. He had a long, illustrious career at Caterpillar, rising through the ranks, stationed in several different countries, exposed to different cultures and ways of doing business. He was rose to the head of global manufacturing for VP of global manufacturing for Caterpillar. And then he retired, but as he says, he failed at retirement. And like many bright people with a lot of energy, he took another role with Basin Holdings, which was a petrochemical oil industry company serving the supplier for that industry. He's since taken a leave of that and is joining us from Maui in Hawaii today. A couple of things about Jim's background with Iowa State. He served for a long time on the engineering industrial advisor in a course that I taught it for about 10 years, but it was going for probably 5 years before that. So for 15 years, he was one of our first speakers and loyal every year, came back to address our class that was called Technology, Globalization, and Culture. So he was always a big hit with that. And I thought a great candidate for Flagship Fridays. One more thing about Jim's background that students should take in a note of is as an undergraduate, he led a group of student leaders to lobby university administration to change the name of Cyclone Stadium to Jack Trice Stadium way back in the 70s and early 80s. And the compromise at that time, I think it was President Parks, this is way before your students, current students' time, was to name the field Jack Trice Field. And that lasted for another 15 years before we actually turned it into Jack Trice Stadium, the only stadium in the country that's named after an African-American football player. And it just shows you what a student leader can affect as they take action. So I'm proud that he was one of those. And I think with that, we will turn it over to our panel, and maybe Abram, start off with how we normally roll this thing out.
Great, thank you, Jim. I think I'd love just to start off. One of the things we'd love to hear is about what you've been doing most recently. So maybe if you'd be willing to tell us a little bit about what you did with Basin Holdings, and then we can kind of from there go back deeper into your story and how you got to that role.
Very good. Well, after I retired, I got a lot of crap from friends about, you can't retire this young, you can't, you know. And I got a phone call one day from McKinsey and Company, the consulting firm, and they were looking for a part-time consultant. And I said, well, how much do you want? They said, maybe a day a quarter. I said, oh, good. I can tell all my friends that I work for McKinsey and Company, and I only have to work a day a quarter. And so I started doing that, and you know, I had a couple of clients here and there. And this Basin Holdings is run majority owned by a guy out of New York, John Fitzgibbons, and he's quite an innovative businessman. And he called me up one day and said he was looking for some help with consulting on manufacturing. And I said, well, how much do you want? And he said, a day a quarter. I said, okay, that's 2 days a quarter. I can handle this. A day a quarter became a day a month. A day a month became a week a month, you know, and then eventually I invested together with him, and we were partners, and I was chief operating officer, and I was back to 80 hours a week. And it was a lot of fun. It was a different industry. It was, you know, they had the core principle of wanting to be the best in the industry, you know, not compete from the bottom, but compete from the front. And so I did that for about 5 years, and somewhere in there I fell in love with scuba diving, and working was getting in the way of my scuba diving. So I stepped back. I'm still a partner, but I don't do any work.
Hey, Jimmy. Well, I want to interject because you had a great story about one of the innovation challenges you helped sort of expose at Basin. Had to do with something at the top of some oil rig or something. And do you remember that story? It was, you always said innovation is solving problems that people didn't know they had. So they were up there banging away at something, and you said, "Why don't do it this way?"
When you the short version of oil exploration is, after you drill an oil well, there's a whole bunch of work that has to be done to prepare the oil well to get oil out of the oil well. It's called the completion phase. But that includes fracking. But during that period of time, there's a variety of tools and instruments and all kinds of high-tech stuff that have to go down this oil well and then come back out of this oil well. And by the way, this oil well might be a couple miles deep. I mean, you know, we're talking about stuff, a long chain of stuff that's got to go down this hole. And the every time you take something out back, the old method was somebody on a man lift and somebody with a really tall crane, and this stuff, whatever it is swinging, and the guy catches it and then bolts it onto the top of the oil well, and away it goes. And then an hour later, he gets back up there and does it again. And our team came up a way to take the man out of all that and automate it all. And it's become the industry standard. And, you know, it took a company that was doing maybe 2 million a year in sales to 400 or 500 million in sales, kind of overnight. Now, of course, the latest oil price drop during COVID, you know, has reduced significantly.
Sure.
But anyway, but the point that Jim was making that I like to make is whatever you do, don't ask your customers what they want, because all they will ever tell you is better, faster, cheaper. No housewife ever asked for a microwave oven. You know, these people didn't ask for this device. They never imagined it. So, you know, when I was in college, I didn't ask for a cell phone.
You know, Jim, I think that's really an interesting insight, because it occurs to me, well, then what do you ask your customer? I suppose you ask them what their problems are, right? What
Certainly ask them what their problems are, but you got to ask the questions in a whole bunch of different ways and piece together the answer. But you ask them what they do. First of all, you ask them what they do, and you observe what they do. And number one, everybody will pay for efficiency. So if you can make whatever they do done with less resources, whether they be human resources or other kinds of resources, then that's a winner. If you can make what they do safer, that's a winner. But you also ask them, what do they hate? Okay. I mean, you know, what do they hate? What about what they do they just don't like? You know, the story of the Dyson vacuum cleaner comes to mind. So Jim and I have a good friend who's now passed away that was a senior engineering manager at Maytag. And Maytag owned Hoover. And Hoover was the standard for vacuum cleaners forever. Except that when, as the years went on, Walmart wanted to sell them for $65. And that meant Hoover had to make them for $30. There's hundreds of pieces in this thing. Just try to figure out how you get hundreds of anything for $30. And so Hoover, they're an innovative company. They thought of all those technology ideas, like the idea that the Dyson had. They're not stupid. They had all those ideas. The only problem is they believed nobody would pay more than $60 for a vacuum cleaner. And so they didn't even patent those ideas. So along comes Dyson, and Dyson says people will pay $250 for a vacuum cleaner if A, it sucks, and B, you don't have to touch the dirt. And lo and behold, okay, so Maytag's only problem was they didn't understand what people hate. So there's countless examples. Frankly, I could give examples out of my own company where we missed it. We had the technology, we just didn't understand what customers value.
Boy, that's a new one for our innovation series. Go find what people hate. I really love that because it's so unexpected and surprising, Jim. That's a fabulous start. And especially, you know, what as a starting point for an innovator, one of the things I think our students struggle with is how to find a problem. And that's a perfect way for how to find a problem to work on.
Can I tag on that one?
Yes.
Sure.
So hi, nice to meet you, Jim. I'm Anna from the College of Design. And one of the things that happens always in design is definitely looking for the pain points, or what we call the annoyances. So I really like that you're saying like what people don't like. And that's the best way. Conversations for our students, because it usually starts with the pain points, right? When things really are not working. Thank you so much. You have more stories? You want more stories like that?
Oh, I have You don't open that can of worms.
I do want, because I find, yeah.
I have an idea for you. I have a project. I have something I hate.
What?
I'm willing to fund the development. Okay. And many of you have probably tried this thing. Okay. Has anybody ever gone snorkeling or scuba diving?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So what do you hate about snorkeling or scuba diving? The damn mask fogs up.
Mhm.
Okay? And so you spit in it, or you put shampoo in it, it gets in your eyes. Okay. And so we all hate this, right?
Yes.
Why does shampoo work? Well, the reason that shampoo works is that it reduces the surface tension of the glass. And so the condensation becomes beads of water and they drip down the mask and they don't condensate on the mask. Well, with all of the technology that exists today, whether it be glass surfacing or there ought to be a way to reduce the surface tension of the glass, either permanently or at least in a way that is easily applied, lasts a long time. Alternately, with all of the developments that exist, I mean, I have all kinds of battery devices that I take underwater. Why don't we have a little rim of wire in the glass and a little battery on the mask so I can heat the mask? So if somebody can solve this problem, and I think the masks are about $100. I think you could sell them for $200 if you can solve the problem for $100. And my challenge, by the way, I'll fund anybody that wants to try to solve that problem.
You know, this is a big opportunity for our students that are watching too, Tim, because again, they're looking for problems to solve, and I like that you have one right up front. So I just sent you an email. We're in. We're going to find a good students to do this.
Well, and just to chime in, even on Anna's point, Jim, I like that you're taking this co-design approach. You're not like, oh, okay, well, we are going to solve an issue for a group of people. We're going to go ahead and bunker down and basically do it on our own. You are inviting the people in which you want to serve, which I think is a really great tip for our students as well. I think a lot of times we're like, yep, got the solution. I'm going to put my head down, or I'm going to get a team together. We're going to solve it. But you have to figure out a way to invite your customers in early on. And so I'd like to know from you, how do you balance inviting your customers in and allowing them to have a say, but not allowing them to totally control the company? Or do you? I'm not sure. I'd just like to know.
Well, I'm going to go off on a tangent first and make a point that I wanted to make today anyway that kind of goes with this, which is it's the question of diversity of thought. And the idea, you know, if I take 5 Iowa-grown IM farm boy engineers, Myers-Briggs ENTJs, and I put them on a problem, okay, they will vigorously debate 5 versions of the same answer. Okay, and they're not gonna. That answer might be innovative. It's by chance. Okay, but they're going to exclude thousands and thousands of answers. You want more stories? My real life story was when I moved to Japan. My job was really interesting. Caterpillar had made this wonderful decision to design product in Japan. They'd never done that before. And it was going to be built in 9 factories around the world, 9 factories in, I think, 6 countries or 7 countries. And they wanted all of the designs and manufacturing practices to be the same. So the idea was to get these people all together on a regular basis and get them to agree on the design and the manufacturing processes of this. So we had Indonesians and Chinese and Japanese and Frenchmen and Germans and Americans and whatever. And they would get together and they would get in these vigorous fights. because they were sure that the other people's ideas, they were so different that these other people were just stupid. And I remember one case in point, but there were many, where I was, I had to stop the meeting, and I had to, the Americans were the worst. I had to take the Americans out in the hallway. I had to say, you know, this Japanese guy that's proposing this, you really think he's stupid? And they said, yeah, man, the guy, that can't be done. There's no way that works. That is just like basic stuff. It just doesn't work. And I said, well, he's a lot of things, but he's got a master's degree in engineering from Tokyo University. He's not stupid. I mean, Tokyo University is the MIT of Japan. I mean, the guy is not stupid. Maybe he sees something about this that you don't see. Well, this is the hardest thing for humans. It's every human. If I go around and ask everybody on this call, however many people there are, I thought there was maybe 30 or something. If I ask everybody on this call if they are interested in diverse thoughts, they will say yes. Of course, we all know the answer to that question. The only problem is that how do I separate? Because sometimes ideas are stupid. So how do I separate a stupid idea from a good idea? And of course, if the idea is really different than mine, I have a bias because I'd rather it be stupid. And so, you know, we flip into this thing. Well, back to your comment, the original question. You know, there are some cases, but customers aren't going to compete with you. I'm not, by the way, I never worry about competition. If we don't think we're good enough to beat the competition, and the competition can have my current ideas because I'm going to have a future idea. I really, you know, I'm running faster than they're running, and if they want to pick up my scraps behind me, you know, that's okay. They can do that. So you can't have too much customer interaction. But the thing to remember is the more stupid you think somebody else's opinion or idea is, the more likely that it's grounded in something you're not seeing. And and therefore you need to load your teams with all sorts of diversity. So diversity of job, diversity of education, diversity of ethnic diversity, gender diversity, and load them up and make sure you protect them. You know, I used to be the sponsor for the women's affinity group at Caterpillar. And I used to tell young women, you know, they'd get frustrated and they'd say, you know, I'm just not going to that meeting because nobody's going to listen to me. You know, my opinion's different and they're not going to listen to me. I'm not going to go. And I'm like, no, you have to go. Let me tell you why you have to go. The only time you add value is if your opinion's different. If you know, if there's a meeting and you know your opinion is the same as everybody else's, then don't go to that one. That's a waste of time. You're not going to add anything. Okay, you need to go to the ones where your opinion is different. And whatever you do, you know, don't meekly raise your hand and say, I might be wrong, but, okay, because the 5 Iowa ENTG male Iowa State educated engineers are going to say, well, she just said she was wrong, so what the hell? It's the number one. There's so many things you can't do about innovation. I mean, you can't schedule it. You can't, legislate it. You can't, you can throw money at it, I guess, but the one thing you can do more than any other thing is to create an environment with diverse thoughts and where diverse thoughts are protected. Diverse thoughts. Now, how do you get diverse thoughts? You just got to find people whose life experiences are different for whatever reason. It doesn't matter the reason. It's not just about race. It's not just about gender. It's anything that makes them more diverse.
You know, Jim, you also identified a really important obstacle, particularly for young innovators. I think there's the question of, am I invited? And also they're polite. So I think, you know, as I think about the woman that you mentioned is, I might be wrong, but there is a sort of some stylistic things that cause people, and especially young innovators, to be dismissed from the get-go.
Yeah.
It's right. And so what are you advising from an innovator personality? I can hear you refer to the Myers-Briggs and some of those details. From a personality standpoint, how do young innovators shore up? What should they be reinforcing themselves with? Because I hear one of the rules is don't introduce your idea with "I may be wrong."
Yeah.
Well, I think that you know, first of all, so, you know, in the HR world, there are two schools of thought. The Gallup people out of Nebraska, their school of thought is figure out what your strengths are and work to your strengths. The Hay and Associates people are figure out what your weaknesses are and shore them up. I'm more of a Gallup guy than a Hay guy. And by that, I mean, you're not going to change who you are. If you're an ENTJ, you're an ENTJ. Okay. If you're, you know, introverted, you're introverted. Don't even try. Work to your strengths. So what do you got to do from a personality point of view? Tenacity. In whatever form it works for you. Perseverance, tenacity.
Yeah.
Don't give up. And you know, no matter what your Myers-Briggs profile is, you cannot give up. And so you just don't give up. And that can be hard. And by the way, you recognize that, you know, if I was a baseball player and I was batting 500, I'd be in the Hall of Fame and I'd be really good, right? Well, so none of us is probably right more than 50% of the time. So the other thing we have to do, humble and be willing to be wrong. You know, a saying I often use is fail fast. I mean, it's everybody's going to fail. Ideas are going to fail. Okay, so fail fast. And don't get too upset about failure. It's okay. You know, you're in the wrong business if you want to be an innovator and you're not being you're not failing fast. You know,
And I'm going to quote you, and don't be an idiot. You said, don't be afraid to be an idiot.
Yeah, don't be afraid to be an idiot. It's okay. Be an idiot. Idiots have great ideas. And when somebody calls you an idiot, okay, don't be insulted. Sit back and go, I'm adding value.
Jim, I wonder that I love where we're going with this, and I think one of the things that people often do is that, you know, tenacity, perseverance, being okay with failure is all well and good and abstract, and then when you encounter it, it somehow seems a little different. I wonder if you maybe take us back to maybe some of those formative years at Caterpillar and share with us some examples of times that you were able to, you know, really maybe get knocked on your duff and then fight through it.
Oh man, you want me to talk about failure? What comes to mind? You know, I think that from my point of view, first as as a manager. I spent most of my 30 years in some way as a manager. And, you know, Caterpillar had, I was plant manager in England. That's when I met Jim Melsa. And we weren't making money and we were trying to fix that. And a little technical stuff, if there's any mechanical engineers on the call. But if you're driving a piece of construction equipment that has a bucket on the end of it that's kind of extended out in front of the thing, and it's full of stuff, every bump you hit, that bucket goes up and down and causes the ride to be uncomfortable. So you drive slower. But if you knew that that was going to happen, then you could use the hydraulic cylinders that hold that up to cancel that oscillation. And it's a feature called ride control. And Caterpillar invented it, I don't know, 25 years ago, and used it on big, expensive machines. And I'm leading this team to try to, and of course, because we invented 25 years ago, patents are all expired and all that stuff. But we were making backhoe loaders in England, and we, you know, those things sell for $50,000, $100,000. And somebody wanted to put ride control on there, and I'm like, hey, we already are the highest priced guy in the market. And nobody's going to pay another $2,000 for this. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so I poo-pooed the use of a piece of technology that we had. Well, our British competition put it in, and they sold it for $6,000 as an option. And it took us 2 years to get it into the backhoe because of timing and testing and all that other stuff. And they promptly lowered the price to $2,000, and that was the end of the opportunity to make any money. And so, you know, my preconceived notion that the customer wouldn't pay for it, the same things I preach about. So, you know, you're going to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and go on to the next one. It's going to happen. You're not going to. I was doing robotic vision, robotic development, and in 1980, started Caterpillar in '78 while I was still students, and in 1980, I think I was doing robotics with vision development. And you can imagine how crude all of this was, but you couldn't buy anything. There was nothing in the industry. We were doing our own. And, you know, we kept failing and we kept persevering. You know, computers weren't fast enough, so we'd go in and change the clock speed, and then we'd have to add heat sinks. And I mean, it was, you know, you just got to keep going. You know, one thing I want to come back and make one last point about, or one more point about the diversity thing, because I think it's really important. People, again, everybody thinks they embrace diversity. Every one of your students thinks they embrace diversity. The number one test is if you're working on something. I don't care if it's a student project or in the workplace. And you say, okay, I'm going to go get some other people's opinions because I value other people's opinions. Question is, we all have people who we know and sync up well, you know, Jim Oliver and I, okay? So am I going to go ask my people that I know think like I do what they think of my project so they can tell me that I did a good job? Or am I going to go find that person that I just think is crazy and they just never agree with anything I say, and they just, okay, and ask them what they think. If you don't do that, then you don't believe in diversity.
That's an interesting concept too. Again, very contrarian. Your mindset is really embrace discomfort, embrace being not as smart as you thought you were, because that means that you're going to ask questions. Embrace those things that normally young innovators run from, right? So, Jim, I'm going to ask you, it's clear that you don't have a problem really, or that you've learned how to tolerate discomfort. Tolerating risk, failure, discomfort is a really important skill if you are choosing to add value. I don't care if you choose to invent something or you choose to build something. So how did you build that confidence to tolerate the discomfort, looking foolish, being told you were wrong, essentially looking like an idiot? I'm wondering how you tolerated that. Oh, shoot, right in the middle of that? My like big question. Curious.
He's back.
So Jim, did you hear my question?
Yes, I heard your question.
Yeah, tolerating discomfort. How do you do that?
You know, first of all, I think that I give some credit to my father and my upbringing to some extent, but sort of beyond that, the biggest epiphany for me was when I took this job in Japan, and they told me my job was, not to be the guy with the opinions, but to coordinate these opinions. And I watched, and of course I had my own opinion, and I watched these arguments. I mean, and they were over all kinds of, even little things like, so on a casting, we often put, we Caterpillar always puts, the part numbers on there, but also the lot heat number. So that if there's ever a problem with that casting, we know how to check to see if other machines have that same problem. Well, the Japanese didn't want to do that. Well, I won't go into how you actually put that on the casting. It's very difficult. And so I made the statement to the Japanese. I was facilitating this debate. I said, it can't cost 1 yen. And he said, if it costs 1 yen and we don't need it, then it costs 1 yen too much. The different values, the different, and so I got exposed so many times and got my eyes open, just like every day. Different people, because they had all these people from all these, there were teams, and there was probably 150 people representing different parts of the product from these 9 different facilities, and watching what, first of all, between them, but even what I intuitively said, well, that can't be right, and watching it turn out to be right was a very profound, there's a professor at Colorado, well, he's dead, I think, but there was a professor at Colorado State University years and years ago who produced a series called Who You Are is Where You Were When. And the whole concept of it is that, when the atomic bomb happened in Hiroshima, if you lived in Hiroshima, you were impacted very differently than if you lived in Ames, Iowa. And all the events of the world, John F. Kennedy's death, whatever significant events they are, you experience them differently and are affected differently, and it shapes who you are. You can't do anything about that part. You can't change your life experience. You can only bring your life experience. So what you need to do is bring other people with different life experiences. One of the problems in the United States right now is the small number of people that have ever been the home team in a war. That's a problem. Okay. Frankly, another problem is that the number of the fact that white males just can't appreciate the fact that they don't have to think every day about what it is to be black, and they just have never experienced it. So my number one thing is you can't create that, but you can knowingly surround yourself. You can knowingly be a sponge. You know, Jim and I talked about the Innovation Center. I, for one, don't really like that name, and he knows that, so that's okay. And the reason I say that is because every department at Iowa State believes they're innovative. Every department at Iowa State believes, every professor at Iowa State believes they're innovative. So the idea that we're going to have an innovation center, well, what the hell? I'm already innovative. What do I need an innovation center for? We interviewed someone to replace Jim Melsa as dean, and we asked him about what he thought about diversity. And to give an example, and he didn't get the job, so this isn't the guy. But he was an electrical engineer, and he said, yeah, he got the power electrical engineers to work with the circuit board electrical engineers. And this was a great champion of diversity. This was his example. I think that schools, I think the Innovation Center can be a place where you teach diversity of thought. Think about even, exercises and projects, and think about rewarding those that go out and get people to be on their project from other departments, and put an English major and an accounting major and a zoologist and a electrical engineer and put them on a project. And I could go off on a tangent because I've had this long idea that Iowa State should have a senior interdisciplinary funded project. I'm ready to donate money to that when you decide to do it. But anyway, long answer.
Yeah, Jim, I think you'd be fairly pleased with, because I do agree, innovation is an easy word. We all innovate. One of the things I think that we set up was an Innovation Fellows program that is universally wide, invites interdisciplinary participation. Probably about half of our students are from other countries or other cultures.
Wonderful.
And what we found is, you're right, innovation attracts diversity. Innovation attracts difference. And because that's an opportunity to create interesting conversation. And I have been amazed by what the students have been able to do in conversation together. So toward that end, as I think about your comment of basically it's an innovation through diversity center, right? And I think that's really important. So I'm thinking of, you are pulling together your superhero team of innovators. What skills would that superhero, because you're talking about diversity, what skills and experiences does that superpower team have?
Wow.
Haha, I have stumped the expert.
I should have done like the politicians do and said, I want these questions in advance. My initial thought is that it doesn't matter. And that you ought to just get it as different as it can be. Obviously, you need some people that have some training in the subject at hand. But not all people with training at the subject at hand. You need some people that have experienced the subject at hand, and then you need some people that don't know anything about it at all. I have become a believer that first of all, there's a lot of innovation, a lot about innovation that's luck, but the only thing that I think that you can do, you can throw money at it, okay, but the only thing you can do to make innovation happen is to create the absolute wildest, most diverse group of people, and then you have to protect those that everybody says don't know anything, and by the way, then you have to empower them. An example. We had this factory in England again, and I got over there, and they made 3 products, and we wanted to make 5, and different products and all this stuff, and we were losing money hand over fist. So I said, you know what, guys, if the only given I had is this is the building you got, and you assumed that it was empty, how would you lay it out? And, they came back 3 or 4 times, and I said, I don't think this is radical enough. I want to see how you'd really do it if you really didn't worry about anything. And they finally concluded that we would change the flow of the factory 90 degrees. And then they went, but obviously we can't do that. And I said, I don't know. You guys are smart people. That's the manager's role, is to say, maybe you can. Go figure it out. Give it a try. So we did, and we didn't shut it down for 1 day. We turned it 90 degrees.
Wow.
And so it's the leadership does have to be able to be able to say, we're not going to eliminate the crazy ideas early. But back to your original question, I think you just go out and get, you almost go to the people that want to form the team and say, who don't you want on the team?
Well, I want to probe a little bit more, Jim, because one thing that you said that I really liked was invite the people who others think might not know a lot, the people who maybe don't have the certifications or the degrees and the Wikipedia pages that you can easily Google. And you said protect them. What are ways that people can protect folks who may not feel as if they're qualified? Oh, I think we lost him again.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, we just couldn't see you. So what are some practical steps or ways that people can protect, like you said? Because I think that that's very interesting, and it's one of the first times throughout this flagship series that someone has brought this up, and I think it's incredibly important to innovation. Because a lot of times we want to invite in the experts, the people who are certified. Those are the people that we lean on. But in reality, how do we incorporate diversity in education as well? Diversity and exposure?
It falls first on leadership, in that, leadership knows who they put on the team. They also know who's getting pushed out. And they also know who's, you get review meetings, and, there's somebody in the corner that doesn't say anything. Okay. And so, leadership has to do things like, Jasmine, what do you think? Okay. And, they're sitting there in the corner, and now they're on the spot. But you also have to do private things. You got to do the one-on-ones. You got to do one-on-ones with the ENTG Iowa guy and say, can you tell me what Jasmine thinks? Okay. What does she think? Can you tell me? Okay. Because if you can't tell me, that's really a problem. By the way, another interesting thing. Can you tell me, is Jasmine married? Now, I recognize from HR point of view, you're not supposed to ask that question. But as peers, you can ask that question. What are her hobbies? Well, I don't know. What do you mean she's on your team? You don't know her? Why don't you get to know her? What does she like? What kind of food does she like? What kind of music does she? Because the team's got to be encouraged to get to know each other. I was with Colin Powell one time, and there was one of these industry seminars in Yuma, Arizona, and you know how these deals go. They pay to get some famous speaker so that people will come, and then they pack the agenda with boring people like me from industries, and then that's how this works. Well, Colin Powell was the featured speaker. I didn't really know that because I didn't pay any attention. I had been asked to come speak. I flew in on the company plane the morning that I was going to speak, and I'm in the green room, kind of prep room for this thing, and there's Colin Powell. And I find out that not only is he the keynote speaker, but he's speaking immediately before me. And I'm thinking, man, this is terrible. But anyway, somebody asked him if he could do one thing to promote world peace, what would he do? And he said double, triple, quadruple foreign exchanges, particularly at the college level, in all directions.
Wow.
And he said, because what happens is you find out these are people. You find out that Iranians are people. You find out that, Russians are people. You find out that the Chinese are people. And also what happens is that foreign exchange students in general tend to do well in life. And so they rise up and they remember their relationships from around the world. So you got to create these teams as a leader. Now I'll comment what you can do as a team member, because most of the people on this call aren't going to go from their current position to being the leader of company. You can be an ally to somebody without agreeing with them. And if you decide as one of your traits, this is, some traits you can't decide. You're either extrovert or introvert, and you can't do anything about it. I don't think you can change that. It just is what it is. But there are certain behaviors you can just decide to practice. And I think you decide to practice that I'm going to be an ally. And by saying ally doesn't mean I support their opinion. It means I'm the one that says, hey, wait a minute. Let's hear her out. Let's hear him out. The one that says afterwards to the person, I may not agree with you, but you should speak up. Keep doing that. We can all do that. It's not hard.
Yeah. I think you bring up such a really powerful point, Jim, and in fact, we had our Innovation Fellows cohort this week, and one of the compelling values they talked about was collaboration and reliance upon each other as a team, building a community, because innovation, change, engagement is a risk, right? So you've been part of a lot of teams. You've also managed successful teams. Can you share what practices you build to create that protective environment for, I know allying is one of them, but what do innovation teams do well and consistently?
Well, one I've said before, but they fail fast. Find a way to try it. Find a way to try it. Find a way to try it. And just do it fast. And then, of course, I commented about, creating allies. I think the other thing that that it's kind of interesting, and of course today's students have so many more resources for this. But you got to go read everything you can find on what everybody else has done. And you know, when we were young, if it wasn't in the Parks library, you couldn't read it.
Yeah.
And by the way, finding it in the Parks library via the Dewey Decimal System was kind of challenging anyway. So today it's quite easy. And you know, the first step has to be to go and, you know, find every, you know, by the way, one of the reasons that I encourage companies, you know, I had this conversation, they won't even remember because management's changed, but I had a conversation with Pella Window one day, oh God, probably 20 years ago. And I said, you need to open a factory in China. And they said, no, we're not going to import windows from China. Importing glass is incredibly expensive. It's not going to work. I said, I didn't mean you should import windows in China. I said, they use more windows in China than anywhere in the world. I said, don't you, and their windows are different. Don't you want to learn all about that, know all about that? And by the way, why don't you want to lead the Chinese market for windows? You already kind of lead the US market for windows. And look at how much you might learn from that. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question very well, but
No, fabulous. Fabulous.
you know,
Jim, I wanted to follow up on something.
Oh, go ahead.
I want to follow up on something, if I might. One of the things you said a little bit earlier, I just thought was so masterful. You were sort of demonstrating on how you might keep a team leader accountable. You know, you're talking about asking, well, what do you know about Jasmine? What does she think about the issue? And I thought that was such a masterful way of holding someone accountable in a way that they could experience as being positive and on mission. I wonder if we're giving advice to students, if I'm a student and I'm on a diverse team and there's diversity of discipline, of gender, of race, or whatever it might be, and maybe I feel like someone's being talked over or not listened to effectively. How would you think about, if I'm a student, how can I hold my team members accountable without putting them on the defensive?
First of all, people worry too much about putting people on the defensive. Gosh, I think I was in grade school when people said, when curriculum said, learn to operate outside your comfort zone, you'll grow. Teachers have said that in grade school and high school and college, and then all of a sudden we say, well, how do we make everybody comfortable? Well, I think that, you really got to say, well, you know what, I'm gonna learn to be uncomfortable once in a while. And you get slapped down a little bit here and there, but I think that it's amazing what you can do with a question. So this person's getting shouted down, and you get your chance to speak, and your statement is a question back to the person that's been getting shouted down, which you just stood with them. You didn't agree with them, you stood with them. All you gotta do is ask them a question.
I've got to say, I'm just kind of sitting here in awe, because what occurs to me as an innovator characteristic that you exemplify is courage. And that's really impressive, really. You took risks, but also I think you recognize you're in a position of privilege, right? So you're the leader. So it's your responsibility to secure that environment. So as I'm thinking, one of the things you mentioned takes a lot of courage, how to fail fast. I'm wondering, what are the indicators to know when you should say fail? Because that's the thing, that's a courageous act to admit and move on from failure. And it doesn't happen quickly because we get invested. So what are the indicators that say fail?
You know, that is, you know, that's kind of like my diversity question. It's really, it's great to talk theoretically.
Yes.
Okay. But you get vested in these ideas.
Right.
Okay. And the question is, you know, when do I say I just need a little more time? Okay. By the way, one key is if you're using the word "I just need a little more time," okay, there is a key right there. Okay, if you're using the word "we need a little more time," that's a less indicating that there's a problem. But if you're using the word "I need a little more time," it's probably time. But the other thing to sort of look for, I guess, is it helps if in fact you're working competing ideas as opposed to sequential. So if you're working 4 ideas to solve a problem,
that's a great idea.
It's easier to say this one is winning. This one is a close second. These 2 are 3 and 4. We're going to put them on the back burner. And you get to say, no, this solution won, as opposed to this solution lost.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, the most mature people, and you know, I've met some of them. In fact, that's one of the reasons I was attracted to this guy in New York that I worked with. Is, you know, he was all for making a big bet. And, you know, we'd spend $5 million and we'd buy this company because it was a big bet. 18 months later, we'd decide that it was a disaster and we'd just move on. And he, you know, he didn't, the people around him or himself, he's like, well, you know, we're not going to bat 1,000.
Yeah.
And so, we're going to be very successful. You know, he would argue going to be very successful out of 1 out of 10, and we're going to be okay on 4 out of 10, and 5 out of 10 are going to fail. The sooner we admit it, the less money we spend.
I think that is just really great. That do approach the problem. Don't get invested in one. If you're going to build a solution around a problem, look at options, look at many, go many directions so that you don't get as invested. And you're looking at comparing them. That's an excellent thought. Nakaya, do we have any questions in our chat?
We do. So we have a question from Jordan that I think piggybacks on what you were just talking about, Jim, and then some of the concepts that you brought up earlier. Jordan's question is, how do we train ourselves to not be biased in our own ideas? So you talked a bit about talking with someone else that's totally different from you, that may challenge you a bit more than the person to the right of you that you're arm in arm with all the time, that you all sync up well. So any other just advice on ways to not really take your own idea first as gold, as the golden standard that everyone else should be following?
You know, it's I'll throw in a story to go with this, but frankly, it's unavoidable. You're going to be biased toward your ideas. Now, it varies a little bit culturally, in that the United States has a culture of where we have fostered individualism. And that is a good culture. That is not a bad thing. It just has side effects. You know, the Japanese have a culture where even if you did a good thing, you don't want to be recognized for it because you don't want to be the nail that sticks up. So if your culture is, as I assume most of the people on the call, is, you know, US based, you're going to have a bias. And you can't not have the bias. what you can do is recognize the bias. And then the other thing you can do is try very hard to create a bias, not reduce the bias toward your idea, but increase your willingness to listen to somebody else's bias. Again, if you start out with your goal in whatever it is you're doing to change fundamentally who you are, kind of good luck with that. Rather to use who you are and embrace this. But I think that I'll use it. I'll inject a couple of examples since you like stories that talk about how strong the bias can be. So now this story dates a little bit, but most of you are old enough. But you know that you go to a grocery store in the United States, and you take your groceries up to the counter, and then there's some high school kid there, and he's bagging the groceries. And back in the day, they'd take them out and put them in your car for you. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they do that anymore, but anyway, they don't here in Hawaii anyway. So anyway, but they did back in the day. And then oppositely, we go to the gas station, and we work really hard to not interact with anybody because we get out of our car and if there was a full service gas station, you wouldn't go there because the gas costs 5 cents more a gallon, and you wouldn't go there, right? And so obviously we value as a society the grocery clerk more than we value the gas station attendant. So I moved to Japan. Everybody told me Japan was this great service. I mean, you get really great. The people are serving each other. So I head out to the grocery store, and I don't speak Japanese, and I'm at the grocery store, and I'm putting my groceries up on the counter, and this gal behind there starts yapping at me. I like did something wrong, and I can't figure it out. Well, eventually I figured out I'm supposed to be sacking the groceries. So I'm like, what the hell? Okay, I thought this was a service place. Okay, I can do it, but it was not at all what I expected to have happen. And so then the next stop was the gas station. So I drive the car into the gas station, and no less than 5 people come running out of the gas station. And I'm getting out, and they're not having that. They're putting the gas in the car, and they're checking the oil, and they're cleaning the windshield, and they're emptying the ashtrays, and they're out. This is like a pit crew. So the next day I go to work, and I find one of my Japanese mentors, and I said, I had this experience. I don't get it. He said, I use the same example. So we go to the United States, and we don't understand you Americans. You insist in the rain and the snow, and often getting gasoline on your hands and whatever else to stand outside and pump your own gas. And then you go to the grocery store, and in the climate-controlled environment of the grocery store, you insist that some high school kid put their dirty hands all over your food. It had never occurred to me. Okay, and now I think about it. Would I trade sacking my groceries for somebody to pump my gas? And the answer is in an instant, right? In an instant. And so I could give you 20 stories like that. Mm-hmm. I even complained one day about chopsticks. I said to the Japanese, I said, look, it's obviously easier to eat food with a knife and a fork and a spoon than these damn chopsticks. And he said, yeah, we don't understand why you Americans insist on using 3 complicated utensils and 2 hands to do what any child can do perfectly well with 1 hand and 2 sticks. You just have to open your mind to anything you see. You know, the one more, because it's one of my favorites. So, yeah, by the way, pandemic is not affecting Japan very much. And I mean, they got a spike, and they recently had a spike, but their total deaths from the beginning of the pandemic to now is less than the US had yesterday. And one of the reasons is they got 300 million people, they got 100 million people living on a landmass a third the size of California. They have been paranoid about disease forever, and their cultures have evolved. They never shake hands. Okay? Never did. They don't shake hands. Okay? They don't share pens. Okay? If you're sick, you don't go to work, and you wear a mask. If you got a cold, you wear a mask. And so Japanese traditional toilets, I don't know anybody on the call has ever been there, but a Japanese traditional toilet has nowhere to sit. Okay, and so Americans go, what the hell? And the Japanese are like, you know, it's cleaner. But what's really interesting is, so you know, have you ever seen these now super automated toilets with they got spray, and they got remote control, and they got heated air, and they got heated water, and they clean you up like no tomorrow. The Japanese are all over this. They're $1,000 a piece. They went from no toilet seats. Okay, but interestingly, these toilets aren't in people's, they are for rich people, but they're not in people's homes, because people aren't going to do that at home. They keep their toilet clean at home. So they put them in train stations. Why would anybody expect $1,000 toilet seat in a train station? You know, or hotels or whatever. So it is amazing the magnitude of different thought. It is so large.
You know, you're talking about innovation, solutions to different problems and different perspectives. And part of innovation is really adopting different perspectives and mindsets. So we would be well positioned in the US to think about some things in the same way as they do in other cultures. So much of innovation is really, you point out very wisely, Jim. I think that a lot of innovation comes with the obligation to change awareness and to be aware. And so when I think about this, you worked for Caterpillar for many years. Can you think of a time where you had to change the awareness radically in order to get people to solve a problem? Where you had to really change mindset to get them to solve a problem?
Yeah, so probably the biggest one was the last job that I had, in that it is clear fact that in general, the Japanese are the best manufacturing people in the world. It is clear fact. And thank you to the Japanese for all the things that have happened to change the U.S. auto industry. You know, when I was growing up, the fact that your car leaked was not a problem. They all leaked. Okay, you big deal. You just put some more oil in it. It's okay. And now, if your car leaks, you think, God, it's something really bad wrong, right? Well, the Japanese made that happen. So Caterpillar had decided, you know, of course, you've all heard these things about just-in-time manufacturing and all that stuff. And Caterpillar decided that they wanted to create a production system. And so the kinds of things, again, Caterpillar maybe is, I don't know, a very old school company. But, you know, we'd have periods of time when, first of all, 90% of everything Caterpillar sells is sold out of a dealer's inventory. So everything, 90% of everything we're building when we're running it down the assembly line is going to a dealer's inventory. So common sense would tell you that if a real customer came along and wanted something, why couldn't he have the next one? But we'd have customers waiting 6 months because we were too busy building inventory for dealers. Okay, and you know, you'd sit back and say, well, God, that is really, really stupid. And you know, all of the factories that make the components, you know, that they're making batch quantities of all these components, and you know, the bottom line is that on any given day, every one of Caterpillar's assembly lines is short parts because we used resources to make parts that we don't need so that we didn't have the resources to make the parts that we do need. So my job was to lead this culture change and create a thing called the Caterpillar Production System across 250 operating facilities. And it was the most frustrating, rewarding thing I ever worked on. Because you know, and so we had training, we had tabletop games, we used incentive compensation, we changed out about half of the senior management. We used every tool in the book. Basically, you know, if you were going to contribute to change by having good ideas and by having ideas, great. If you were just going to drag your feet, then we did 1,000 different tools to try to convince you. And we built these simulated work environments where they were all the same all over the world. We built 20 of them. It cost $250,000 a piece, where people could go in and experiment with these concepts, these manufacturing concepts. And we did things like, you know, we had the chairman of Caterpillar turning wrenches with UAW workers from Peoria, Illinois, or Chinese workers in the hinterlands of China to bridge these gaps. There's 1,000 tools that we used, and every one of you can invent another one.
I think we have another question, Nakaya. Do you want from a student? Do you want to give it one shot?
Absolutely. So we have a question from Colton, and the question is, along the lines of COVID-19, what changes do you see taking place or remaining in place as we look towards the future of our countries and potential careers? How will this pandemic continue to change and reshape, our lives, or will it, in your opinion?
Well, it absolutely will. If for no other reason, you know, it's probably the most significant global event that has occurred since Hiroshima. And everybody's touched differently by it.
Hopefully he
That's
comes
an
back.
important question. I'm assuming he will come back.
I hope so.
Maui is a long way. That comment, I just want to land on that comment. It's the most significant thing since Hiroshima. You know, in terms of really stopping and shocking the country. And interestingly enough, that's exactly the climate for innovation. But it's often, so when you think about how our brains are wired, and Abram, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, innovation often comes as a result of threat, right? And you've probably seen that. Jim, we got to follow up with you on Hiroshima.
Yeah. So anyway, what do I think is going to stick? I think the idea that when you're sick, you should tough it out and go to work. I think that idea got squashed. Okay.
Yes.
I think at a minimum, masking when you have any kind of a cough or a cold or anything like that, I think that's going to stick. I'd like to think getting rid of the handshake is going to stick. But frankly, the Japanese bow is much better than the fist pump or the elbow pump. So I don't know if that one's is gonna stick.
Yeah.
From a technology point of view, I don't know how many of you are closely following what's been going on with these vaccines. But the vaccine development, these vaccines are different at their core, and that probably accelerates and changes vaccine development in a whole bunch of ways. You know, we may see an AIDS vaccine. We may see, you know, we're certainly going to see more effective flu vaccines. And so the other thing that's going to happen, I think, is the use of technology got accelerated. So more people order things online than did before by, you know, an accelerated factor. More people, you know, it's interesting because, you know, the first thing people did with Zoom, of course, is I'm Zooming to my work or I'm Zooming to my immediate family. But hey, my family, well, if we can do Zoom, why don't we do all the cousins that haven't seen each other in 45 years?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we did that at Christmas.
So I mean, you know, some of these cousins I never met. And we Zoomed. Okay. And so we wouldn't have done that if it weren't for the pandemic. The contactless technology, you know, the grocery industries has been playing for 20 years with ordering groceries online and having them delivered. Well, that took a bump.
Yeah.
You know, brick and mortar retail is going to change. I don't think it's going to go away. I think that the anchors at shopping malls are going to become more entertainment or athletic, and then there may be shops, but there'll be shops because you're buying this quaint thing and it's adjacent to the anchor. You know, I don't know. But you know, in the end, I see nothing but upside. You know, the trikini has become a thing. You know what a trikini is? You know what a bikini is? Yes, you know what a bikini is. Yes, we all know what a bikini is. Okay? A trikini adds a mask. It matches. Okay.
Oh, that is hilarious.
Anyway, so
okay,
there's
I'm going to
a whole
stop.
bunch. There's an awareness. What has happened is an awareness about protection of public health in a huge way. And so now entrepreneurs and innovators can say, all of a sudden, by a step function, the world values protection of public health more. So how can I capitalize on that?
There you go.
You know, Jim, I'm going to, unfortunately, we're nearing the end of our time, so I do want to capture any last questions from Nakaya, but I do want to say what you're talking about is a social awareness campaign. That's innovating, that's social innovation. And that this has caused us to really change an entire system of beliefs, practices. We've evolved advocates. all sorts of opportunity, because the hardest place to innovate is here. As you point out, don't be an idiot. Pursue the things you hate. They're not natural to us. The hardest innovation is social innovation. And so I think that's, you really touched on something that none of our other innovators really spent a lot of time on. For that, I'm grateful. Nikaya, do we have any other questions before we go?
We don't have any questions from students, but I do have a closeout question for myself. So Jim, one thing that you mentioned a little bit earlier, you said my Japanese mentor, and I wanted to put a pin right there. Mentorship, we have so many students who are learning, taking in new concepts, evolving, innovating, and they're trying to figure out this dynamic but also challenging world of mentorship. How do they make the ask? How do they make themselves seem valuable to this person, but also understanding that they're in a position of learning as well? How do people go about that? Could you talk about how you went about asking your mentors and what you would suggest for students who are coming out of college trying to figure out just this crazy world we call innovation?
This is one that I actually do have. A lot of companies, and Caterpillar was one, that used to, we say to our leaders, you need to be a mentor. And so you need to go find people to mentor, and you need to be a mentor, mentor. And then employees would say, well, Joe got a mentor and I didn't get one. Okay. That's all backwards. I went through my whole career, and I was fortunate, again, to be at part of the career level. If I needed to, I could pay for a mentor. Okay. Hire a coach, a consultant, or whatever else. But I felt from a very young age that I needed to be deliberate in my brain that I had multiple mentors at the same time. Some of them knew they were my mentor because I walked up and said, Jim Oliver, will you be my mentor? Okay. And I must say, I suppose it happens, but I never had anybody other than to say, I never had anybody ever say anything other than, I'm honored that you ask.
Yeah.
Okay? I never had anybody say no, but there were some that I just didn't approach, but I just said, you know what, I want to be like them.
Yeah.
And so I had them mentoring me without them necessarily knowing that they were mentoring me. But if you can't sit down and say, right now, even as a student, if you can't identify whether they be upperclassmen, whether they be graduate students, or whether they be professors, or whether they be people you work for in internships, or whether they be people in the community, or whether they be relatives, you can't identify 3 people who you think of as mentors, then you need to go do that. And then they'll change over time. But you absolutely, okay, I mean, I will tell you that even though he didn't work at Caterpillar, for 20 years, I considered Jim Melsa as a mentor. I don't think we ever had that conversation, okay? But some of them I did have with.
So Jim, I just want to say on behalf of our panel, and I'm sure Abram, I could see you smiling. I don't think I've seen Abram smile so much through any of our series. You just resonated very profoundly with, I think, all of us, and really made some statements that I think were courageous and daring. And also, really, I'm grateful for the time to reflect upon social innovation and changing mindsets and belief. I think you did a fabulous job. Jim Oliver, would you like to close us out today?
Yeah, echo all the thanks, Jim. It's really, I knew you would knock it out of the park, as I know you well. And we want to keep you engaged with everything that's going on here, despite the distance, and look forward to having you come see what's going on when you get back in Iowa. So Thank you so much.
And we are inviting you in closer. Yeah, we are inviting you in, where I think I have a group of students that will take on your mask challenge.
There you go.
Wonderful.
All right.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Innovation
Thanks,
anywhere.
everyone. Bye, Jen.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.